All right, and welcome back to another episode of the Unframe of Mind show, where we have uncomfortable conversations without a condom. I'm your host, Daniel Wagner, and today I have a couple guests to discuss the topics of capitalism and um, we. Gentlemen having a conversation in one of the chat groups that I'm a part of, and I appreciate that they were having it in a very what we see online is people and it quickly descending into cursing, yelling, name calling, and all kind of just BS, and it never actually results in anything productive. Not to say that these conversations they had peacefully necessarily resulted in anything productive, but it was nice to see and prove that they can be had. These conversations can be had, and that's really all I've been trying to show with the show in the beginning is we can agree, we can disagree, and we can still get along and be friends. It reminds me of back in the day when I used to go out and play hacky sack in the courtyard at high school, and we would have such a variety of different ideologies. Well, I wouldn't say ideologies. We're still in high school, but we're still young people trying to figure out the world, and we're having differences of opinions, and that was great. I just don't see that kind of thing happening anymore. I couldn't imagine that to be the case in in a high school setting anymore. Correct me if I'm wrong. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and bring in our guests today and introduce them, and we'll just see where this conversation takes us and go from there. And I'd like to introduce Mr. John and Mr. Bryahn to the show tonight. Bryahn, why don't you tell us about yourself and a little bit about why you're here today?
All right. Well, my name is Brian. Software programmer, data analyst, worked in statistics, majored in math. I taught high school for a little bit, didn't much like it, and so went on to software programming. Um, I'm a socialist, and I guess that's probably all that's relevant for right now.
And John?
And I'm John. I've been pretty much self-employed for about the last 30 years. I came from a technology background, and recently I changed into an industry that seemed like fun because I was in a position to be able to do it. And my background has always been running and operating businesses.
So we have a socialist, we have a capitalist, and we have myself, an anarchist, who I tend to believe here recently, especially that society is going to actually require a little bit of both. I would say more of the communist style living, capitalist style living, something like that. I'm not really sure exactly. I just want to explore the idea and see where that takes us and see what you guys think about it. But as I was alluding to before, I just want to say I appreciate you guys having a civil conversation in the chats. I like seeing that happening. I don't know if you guys have that experience a lot, or if this is more of a rare occasion for you guys. So, what's been your general experience as far as those kinds of conversations?
Well,
Well,
go for it.
Either one. I'm sorry.
I'm in discussions like that, and I frequently see them devolve into something where you can't even try to communicate with people. This particular thread that we're both a part of, we both try to further the conversation and figure out from each other where we're coming from and try to learn from each other. And you're right, I don't see that a lot.
All right. Yeah, I guess from my experience, online, generally, it's very hard to have civil conversations. It generally does devolve into name calling. But in person, I've found that most people are pretty reasonable. So,
Yeah, I've noticed that as well. I think people tend to be pretty reasonable for the most part. It drives me nuts seeing our commentators constantly uh, putting us at each other's throats, essentially, just making this assertion that we're all, the other guy is the big enemy, and the other guy is, we hear demon rats and maggots, and that you hear that constant name calling back and forth, and it just makes it sound like the other side is just super evil, and then as a result it just makes it even more difficult to have the conversation. It's like what's going on here? That I don't know. I can't listen to that stuff very very long before I'm just like, oh, you're saying the same thing as the other guy, just the opposite. I guess that's all that's happening.
Right. Yeah, there needs to be some time put in to figure out what the other person is thinking, where they're coming from, where their background is, and just really getting an understanding. Because until you get that kind of understanding of where they're coming from, it's
Yeah.
almost impossible to have a conversation with anyone.
Yeah, the biggest thing I've noticed is when I have an opinion on something, for example, and I'm such an anomaly. I'm you don't meet too many anarchist atheists like who also have conservative or libertarian leanings. It's just I'm just not the norm. So when I have an opinion on something, when I challenge somebody, the knee jerk reaction is to automatically assume I'm the opposite of that, and it's like no. So for
Right.
example.
You seem like you're in a weird niche where you kind of aren't the opposite of a lot of things.
Yeah, yeah, like, if I have a disagreement with somebody on the left, they're like, "Oh, you guys are always this and that." I'm like, "You guys? Who is that? I don't support Trump. Yeah, I'm an anarchist. I don't support anybody in government." Like, that's not how this works. It's just heartbreaking a little bit that nobody is curious enough to get to know the other person.
All
Um,
right. I did want to say, just so you know, anarchy and socialism, they're not mutually exclusive. I too consider myself an anarchist. I just don't actually believe that anarchy is something that we can just move into immediately. And I think we talked about that a little bit, and we kind of
yeah,
maybe agreed on that point.
yeah,
Um,
we have.
okay.
Yeah, and now that has me curious because, I come from more of the capitalist side, and
Mm.
a lot of people that argue against capitalism think that the government is the big issue here, is like with or the big corporations, which happen to be a government entity. When I'm looking into what socialism is, what I'm seeing is it's based on the government being in control of everything, and I'm not really sure how, because I've never understood that myself. Maybe you can explain that to me. How you have socialist anarchism, I guess, or what would you call it?
Okay. So I'm trying to address the point about the government controlling everything.
Yeah.
So there are some views of socialism that do have the government in control, but there are some views of capitalism that have the government in control. They call it command capitalism. So, but I'm not of the opinion that the government should be in control. And I actually don't think the majority of American socialists are for the government being in control. Um, so, what most socialists in America, if you can go check this out on the DSA website, tend to go for is worker co-ops. And so, as you probably know, Marx, one of the most famous socialists, his big thing was to get the means of production into the hands of the workers. And so there were kind of a split in socialism how you do that. One way was to get the government in control, let the government be the proxy for the workers, and then that way the workers have control of the government. That way doesn't work out, or at least hasn't worked out, at least from what I can see.
Mhm.
And I think just a bad idea just to give a central power all of your control and power. That's
Yeah, I
um,
I would be inclined to 100% agree with
uh,
that. This is a recipe for disaster. On par with like the Animal Farm
yeah,
storyline.
yeah.
Yes.
And so, but the other, another kind of branch of socialism, like I said, is about giving the workers direct control via things like worker co-ops. So
Yeah.
that way you don't have this two-tiered system where you have the owners and then under that the workers who essentially funnel their money up to them. So it's more of a workers owning, controlling, and so forth. That's the type of socialism that is the predominant strain of socialism in US, I believe also in most of Europe. So I feel like a lot of time when we're talking about the concept of the government controlling things, it's more than likely a straw man if you're talking to an American socialist or a lot of European socialists. I haven't met a lot of I guess Latino American socialists. Well, it's not Latino American, but Latino socialists or Asian socialists.
Mhm.
That may be the thing there, but I haven't really run into that in the Americas.
Yeah, basically what I was basing that on is your basic government or basic Google search, "Hey, what is socialism?" And that tends to be the key definition for it, and it always every definition I looked at involved government. So I
Yeah,
want.
I think if you were to Google it right now, I
Mhm.
do think the first thing that comes up it says like in control. I think it says government or it gives you an or statement there. I can double check that too.
you're gonna make me actually Google something, aren't you?
Yeah, just go for it. I mean,
I
I
haven't
could be wrong. I could be wrong on that, but I think the last time I checked, I think it did have like an or portion in there.
Right, let me double check 'cause I've not used Google in a long time. I use DuckDuckGo.
Oh,
Um,
okay, well that's fine. You can use your
so
preferred
so
search.
okay, just so we're on the same page, it does say a political and economic theory of social organization which advocates that the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the community as a whole. Okay, that's a little different definition than I've seen.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's that. So help me
Mhm.
understand this. Because that's what I think of when I think of more communism, but I also think of again, when I think of communism, I think of strict governmental control as well. And I think honestly that might be the sticking point where a lot of capitalists may have the hang up about socialism in general.
Mhm.
I don't want to speak for you, John, but just in general, that's been my experience. Is when I think of socialism or communism, I think of Chairman Mao and the communist revolution in Russia, and I think about these terrible examples, and that kind of dissuades me from even looking into the socialist idea in general.
Right. It does. I try to get my head around how you could have something like that operate and not wind up down that road.
I got you. Well, here I found a gosh, I wish I remember Madeline or something like that is her name. She's a TikToker that does these videos where she has a fashion brand. She's got all sorts of like piercings and colorful hair and jewelry and stuff. And she's always detailing and very eloquently, I might add. I'll post a picture of it here.
So I run a business on a socialist platform that's existed for 11 years as of January of this year, which is longer than the majority of businesses exist. So we're doing okay. We're holding it together. But there's a lot of skepticism about how my business runs, mostly because we have a system where everybody earns the same take-home pay per day worked, which means our photo assistant, Ria, our photo intern, she earns the same rate for a day of work that I do as the legal sole owner.
You've been exposed to anything like that before,
I've seen the co-op ideas, and if people want to get into that and do that, I mean, I kind of agree that it kind of fits in with both the socialism model and the capitalism model. Like it's kind of its own thing. It's kind of mutually exclusive of the bigger.
So
The bigger.
let me throw this question at you, John. Then, what would be your biggest concern with an idea like socialism?
I think you wind up with a lot of creativity will be lost. That it'll stifle a lot of creativity and growth. When you take away the incentive for people to do better with their life, a lot of that gets lost. You just don't wind up with the drive of people making a better life for themselves. Really benefits the economy as a whole.
I guess what comes to I would like to, if I can, I prefer to work in concrete examples. It
Okay.
helps visualize, like what would be an example of this scenario playing out for you? Like, just I don't know, just give me something to work with here. I mean, we could take it down to the individual level. Say I've just started this new job. I'm at this co-op. Maybe that's a direction that can help us spell this out. I don't know.
Okay. I have a hard time getting my head around how that could possibly create better opportunities for people. It seems like you're boiling everybody down to the lowest common denominator. Seems to be where it winds up most of the time. I don't know if I come into the situation and I come in with a lot more knowledge and experience, and how do I get compensated accordingly when maybe I bring in a lot more value than someone else does?
So are you saying something like, okay, I've got one guy is working for the company. He's a janitor. He's cleaning toilets and stuff. But I'm, a highly educated programmer, and or whatever. Are you saying that there should be some kind of difference in compensation between the two to reward that? Is that kind of what you're
I think there is. And
saying?
Is there an opportunity for me to even move out of that business into my own business? Maybe I get enough experience that I want to go start my own thing.
Brian, you still with us?
Yep, I'm listening.
Okay. Okay.
I guess I'm not really understanding how John's actually addressing kind of the point here, and maybe I can help here.
Sure.
So when it comes down to work co-op, there's nothing in a worker co-op that implies that everyone must be compensated the exact same. As a matter of fact, uh, the Mondragon Corporation is the world's largest co-op. It's actually a federation of many worker co-ops. Um, I think they have somewhere around 80,000 employees. So that shows at the very least that co-ops are scalable to almost any size that you would want. But I think their pay kind of rule of thumb is that no one can get paid more than 8 times more than anyone else in the company. So there is still a range of pay that can be done. So I guess I'm not seeing where you're getting the assumption, if you are making the assumption that a janitor and a programmer get paid the same. I'm not sure where that comes from.
So what I'm hearing you say is, you can go into a co-op and the rule is that nobody can get paid 8 times the lowest. Is that's
Yeah, that's the
so,
kind of general standard that the Mondragon
and,
Corporation set, and
yeah.
I guess a lot of other co-ops have tried to use that since the Mondragon Corporation was very successful. I think it's like the 6th largest company in Spain, which would put it around like AT&T, Berkshire Hathaway in the United States.
Yeah, and to be fair, I've never heard of this corporation or this company. You didn't. It's not a corporation. It's worker co-op, right?
It's a confederation of many worker co-ops. It's spelled like Mon, M-O-N, and then Dragon, one word. If you just want to like look it up and just get a quick browse of Wikipedia or something on it.
Well,
I
from what I understand, or from what I feel like this probably came about is, okay, so there's got to be at some point there's some kind of negotiation happening, and these people that join this company are like, hey, we're cool with 6 times the amount the lowest person's making, and then for whatever reason you run into issues where you can't quite get the people you need, so you maybe have to sweeten the pot a little bit, so they end up kind of falling into maybe like okay, let's go 9 times, 9 times, and then some people start going, well, that's not really fair, and then they make their case, and they, or whatever. I'm just kind of playing this out in my head how this might look, and then at some point they kind of settle in on, okay, 8 times the amount is about the amount that everybody who joins the company, they're aware it's here, they're aware that that's how we work, they're cool with it, they may not be completely happy with it, they'd probably prefer to, the lowest paid guy probably prefer to get paid, somewhat equally to the highest paid guy, but we do have to have a difference based on different compensation stuff. But I imagine there's some kind of a negotiation that happens to make that number be the number that it is, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that
kind of
number
accurate.
8. Yeah, I'm pretty sure the number 8 didn't they didn't dig it out of the earth. There's no objective truth or anything to it. So I'm pretty sure there was some negotiation going back and forth. And and if another co-op decided to do 10 times, it's like, that's not that big of a deal.
That's where I was going next. So you wouldn't, I don't think honestly you'd end up with, even in a strictly capitalist society, a non-government intervention, non-regulated capitalist laissez-faire style system, I don't think you would ever end up with the ridiculous disparities you see even now between the highest paid CEOs versus their lowest paid guys. I just don't think you would see that.
I guess I don't understand why that would be a consequence of the government, like the fact that some CEOs are paid. I'm just going to kind of pull a number out of my butt here, like 1,000 times more than their lowest paid employee.
Right.
There's that seems like that just makes sense in capitalism, given the fact that you have people who are like the owners in this very hierarchical structure.
Right.
And there's nothing that prevents anyone from saying that your pay is this versus my pay is that, other than the negotiation. And then when you really talk about those negotiations, you really see a lot of capitalists saying things like, oh, the minimum wage should be lower or less, or not exist at all. So that means they're wanting to pay people even lower than that 1,000 times gap.
Yeah,
So
I can address both those, John. If you want to address those, you feel free to jump in, man.
Okay.
But basically the first point about how we prevent that from happening. In absence of regulation, what you have is more competition, and what happens is these corporations are able to use this tax structure, this government created tax structure to set themselves up in such a way where they can influence politicians, they can buy different regulations, and they can effectively what's the term for it, John? Help me remember this. It's something where you use regulation to make it so that the new guys can't come into the regulatory capture.
it's
Regulatory
called
capture.
capitalism. Called capitalism.
Well,
Well,
yeah,
see,
I don't
now,
agree. I don't benefit from that. I'm not a big guy. I'm in business for myself. I don't employ a lot of people. I'm not a big guy. I don't have that sort of power. I very frequently go without paying myself to see that other people are paid within my group.
well, I think
Yeah.
it's really important to distinguish the difference between capitalism and what some people call crony capitalism or even corporatism. Because in an anarcho-capitalist society, there wouldn't be corporations. There's no tax shelter structure. There's nothing to protect you from the results of your bad decisions in that way. But what I was saying is you take out the regulations that prevent these smaller companies from even competing with these larger companies because they have to meet all these stupid requirements that otherwise don't make any sense, that only the big corporations can comply with. And it ends up equalizing out a lot more than what you're seeing today. Like today is not, it's ridiculous. It's
Well,
just plain stupid.
well,
Right. Yeah, it is.
the way I kind of see it is, so
Wait,
capitalism.
did we all
is
just
only a
agree on?
concept.
Did we all just agree?
I think we might
Oh,
have.
I don't know if I do, but
Well,
maybe
no, I
we
mean,
do. But maybe we do.
I
Maybe
mean,
we
on the
do.
point that what we see today is just ridiculous and stupid.
Oh yes. We agree on that 100%. But
Sorry,
I guess
I didn't
what.
mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Oh no, you're good. Yeah. So I guess what I'm saying is, I don't understand how. So if you have, let me reset. One of the premises in capitalism is that the concept of competition, and the better company, eventually wins out, and the smaller company or the worse off company crashes. So just that by itself kind of implies a narrowing of the amount of competition that's out there, because the bigger guy or the better guy or whoever produces the better product should win. And so after you get the constant cycles of winning and winning and winning and winning, and you take out the losers and the losers, you're going to end up with something pretty large. And you don't even need like heavy regulation to do that. You could do that, like if we can do like a quick thought experiment. And I think it's something that happened with oil companies.
No, thought experiments aren't allowed on this show. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Yeah. So we can, like, hypothetically, like if you have a gas station, and your gas station, somehow you were able to do well, you were able to get kind of a decent area under your control. Someone else who's trying to enter the gas station business, even if they come up with a better product, you can, if you have a large enough landscape of gas stations in the region, you can drop the gas around the areas where that new one is starting, take a loss for that area, but have your other areas, maybe jack them up by penny or two per gallon, and you can essentially starve that new gas station out, and then force them to sell. And you don't need regulations to do that. All you need to do is just have enough capital already invested in the area around it.
Or you use the tool of the government to be able to take that, to be able to force them out of business through regulation as well.
Yeah, you can do either one, but you don't have to use the tool of the government.
The common thing that happens a lot now is using the government as a tool to further their business. And I have a problem with that kind of capitalism.
Yeah,
we all agree on that.
Like, that is not capitalism.
Yeah,
no, I'm saying we all agree on that. What I'm saying is, there's still, without the government, you could still have that scenario where I simply depress the prices around your gas station, drive you out of business, and just increase the prices slightly to my other gas stations that aren't being challenged. I don't need government to do that.
Yeah,
we're all agreeing the government can be used for bad things. I'm talking about a strictly capitalist situation here.
I would go one step further and say that even with the scenario that you set up with the worker co-op, there's nothing keeping those workers from coming together and going, "Hey, we've got this new competition in town, and we're doing pretty well for ourselves over here as this little group we got." There's no reason, there's nothing stopping them from necessarily dropping their prices and doing the exact same tactic.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. But this actually is going to go to a larger problem of monetary systems in general, which I think I've discussed with you guys before, at least a little bit, about how monetary systems are problematic to a large degree. And
Mhm.
that's why, kind of to circle back a little bit, when we were talking about communism and communist states and their problems. Um, if you look up communism as defined by Marx, it's a classless, stateless, moneyless society. And so ultimately, I think most socialists want to get towards that end of having some type of moneyless, classless, stateless society. And so the monetary system in general is a problem. But we can see that predatory capitalism is far more problematic as far as like seeking out the ability to like crush other businesses. I just really haven't seen a lot of co-ops, trying to crush the competition in the way that capitalist societies have.
Yeah, I would
Well, the
say
capitalist
I would say the
regime.
same thing in general. The
Mhm,
99% of your capitalists, or the people who believe in capitalism, they're not out there trying to crush the competition either. Actually, I've seen a huge mindset in a lot of these scenarios where you kind of encourage. Okay, to give you an example, I'm part of a couch flipping group on Facebook, and
mhm,
I flip couches, and I am very aware of the competition in my area, but I still get on that group and I still offer tips, advice. We help each other out. We improve each other. It's there's nothing keeping us from doing that. It's just there's a different mindset in the kind of people that are willing to use the levers of government power to block out the other guy. And it's like if the amount of people, I think, in the general population who have that mentality tend to be of the minority. They tend to be a very small portion of the group. The problem is, in either scenario, in either situation, whether it's a co-op or a capitalist or whatever, once you introduce the concept of government, and once you introduce those levers of power, there's a lot of incentive to pull those levers, to help yourself out. And people, they do respond to incentives. I don't care who you are. I don't care what your beliefs are. People respond to incentives, and that's the big issue that I'm seeing is, where yes, you're going to have people behaving badly in either one of these systems. Um, but when you add the magnifying glass to it called government, it's only going to get exponentially worse. And then when you add in the idea that it's either got to be this system or it's got to be that system, and everybody's battling about it, they're not focused on over here, daddy government controlling all of it. Guys like us are too busy bickering back and forth about the benefits of one system versus the other, rather than even exploring the idea that maybe a little bit of both would be okay. That would probably be how we would run some things. I would say healthcare would be more of a worker co-op scenario. I think in that general arena, I don't think capitalism works as well. I think you would do much better having a completely different system that wouldn't currently be able to exist in our current paradigm, if that makes sense. But other things like, I don't know, programs, widgets, actual physical products that you touch and hold and develop. There's a lot more incentive to have that set up as more of a capitalist style business model. Maybe not. I don't know. It really just depends on where you're at and what you feel like ideologically. But I don't see any reason why in the absence of government why both systems couldn't intermingle and work together and actually create something even better in the scenarios where it's appropriate.
yeah. So sorry to kind of go back to your previous statement where we were talking about uh, capitalism and its kind of predatory nature.
Mhm.
And think you were saying that most capitalists don't actually have that predatory nature. I think you said 99% don't want to crush other businesses.
I'm just throwing out numbers, but
No, 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 yeah, no,
yeah.
no. I'm not. I'm not holding you to that number. I'm not going to say give me the research paper.
Does seem pretty accurate, though.
Yeah, just
But-
just in my general experience, I mean, most people are real cool and they want to help other people succeed. Like,
Yeah, and actually, I think that is actually the benefit of a co-op.
Mhm.
Because the thing about it is, in a co-op, if 99% of the people don't want to be the people who are going around crushing other businesses, that democratic vote, because worker co-ops are supposed to be based on democracies.
right.
Though that 99% is going to win and say we're not going to go crush. Now, on the flip side, in a capitalist situation where now you don't have the workers necessarily voting on what the corporation does. So now all you need is to have that, just to be to go with the analogy, that 1%, that one guy or gal or a small group of people to decide, you know what, let's crush everybody. And then you end up with the Walmarts and the Amazons and so forth. So with capitalism, all you really need is just a few of those type of people, and the amount of power that we amass towards the top of that structure can let them go crazy. Whereas a more flat structure, where people are voting democratically on what do we do with our company, you have a lot less chance of that happening.
Yeah, don't the stockholders kind of have some say so in who the board is, and what those decisions are made? Maybe they don't make the decision on a daily basis, but they vote for those board members, and it kind of takes a mindset that your investment in that company needs to be maybe thought out a little different. If you're investing your money in a business that's out to dominate the world, that's kind of what you're asking for when you put your money there.
And
Well,
on
I mean,
on
that
top
might
of
be
that,
true,
sorry,
but
sorry,
it's happening.
hey, on top of that, not only that, but when you have these tax structures set up, when you have this government structure set up, you can go and behave as badly as you want to behave, and then if your business gets shut down, you're not held liable or responsible. Like the dude that owns the company is not going to have his house taken away because he's protected behind this tax structure. And so we see scammers and stuff doing this all the time. They will run a business until it runs to the ground, and then they'll just open it up under some other LLC or some other name, and then they just continue to do what they're doing because there's no way to hold them accountable. Whereas if you didn't have that structure in place where it was just strictly capitalist, if I'm the owner of, say, XYZ company down in town and I make a major boo-boo, well, I might be held liable for that. I might be actually responsible. I actually risk losing my livelihood, my house, and my cars, and my there's actual risk to the decisions I make. So I'm going to be a lot more careful. I'm going to be a lot more not intuitive. I'm just going to be a lot more careful about what kind of things that I choose to do and how I interact with the community around me in general. Does that make sense?
It does, but I think we might be like putting the cart before the horse thing here. I think it's actually the rich business tycoon people who have lots of money to spend on the government. They're the ones who are pushing those rules. So it's not like we the people voted those rules in. It was mainly for the most part, it was the rich capitalists who said, all right, I need some way to shield my money and to shield myself from liability.
Yeah.
And so the capitalists did the smartest thing they could do is they went and bought some people.
Yeah. You just reiterated the point I made earlier in this discussion.
But I'm agreeing with your point completely. 100%. But this is just basic. I mean, because remember, we're both anarchists in the lone view. So I'm 100% agreeing with you there. But I guess what I'm saying is that whatever institution in a society has the monopoly on violence, the capitalist is going to buy that.
You're not going to find any argument with me.
Yeah, and so this is what I'm saying. This is a fundamental issue with having a system where a person can get so rich that they can influence like the government or any societal organization to the point that the people who live in it have virtually no power compared to the capitalist or just the rich person who's buying it out. This is a hierarchy problem, a class problem.
So how do you?
I'd say it's more of a monopoly on power problem. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What was that, John?
How do you keep people from buying other people out for that power?
Well, one thing is like I was saying with the with worker co-ops, the money is going to be more evenly spread. So you're not going to be funneling all the money to the top, because there really isn't a top in a worker
Just
co-op.
to interject, I would say the same thing would kind of happen with a decentralized capitalist society as well. But continue.
All right.
That's
Well, even in a decentralized capitalist society, I'm thinking that you're still talking about you having an owner who ultimately can say, the fruits of your labor, they're going to funnel up to me, and I don't even necessarily have to be a worker.
Yeah,
I can
well,
just collect.
that's the beauty of it is in either scenario, yours or the one I just said, is the workers do have the ability to go, well, I don't like that guy, I don't like this company, I like the idea of this co-op over here, I can go work for this. It's the voluntarism that's implicit in all of this that I would love to see, that allows the workers that power to if they want to go work for that capitalist, if they want to go work for that socialist, whatever, they can do that. That would be amazing.
Yeah, that would be great, but I think kind of in our society today, the the there isn't really that freedom available to
Not
go.
no, not as much, no.
Yeah, and so like if we had like if there weren't all these coercive pressures on us to just go and work for somebody, and the fact that there aren't just tons of worker co-ops around. Um, I guess what I'm saying is that it sounds like a good idea, but it just isn't happening. It's not practical right now because there isn't that freedom available.
What's your thoughts on all this, John? You've been kind of
I agree. There should be total flexibility for people to go from job to job to job to wherever it suits them well. And I think there's a lot of governmental pressure that's causing stuff to not happen the way it should happen. A lot of businesses are crossing state lines because one state over taxes, another state under taxes.
Yeah.
It just
marijuana is legal in
all
one,
right. It's just crazy.
but as soon as you cross this invisible line, all of a sudden you're a felon.
Right.
It's so absurd and ridiculous.
It is. Either you can or you can't, and I'm there's I don't know. I think there's a role. There is a role for government, but government has gotten so big and so out of control that I'm not sure what it does anymore.
I'd like to push you on that a little bit. You said the government has a role. I know you don't know what that is necessarily right now, but what would you I guess like the government to do that you don't think the private market in either one of these systems could provide?
I think you've got some basic infrastructure programs that are beyond being solved with a private solution, like roadways, national defense stuff. It's pretty limited.
Well,
I mean, if you dig into what the enumerated powers in the Constitution are, that really limits what the government should be doing, and I'm not sure there's a role for the government to do much beyond that.
Yeah, at a risk of making this conversation be more about anarchy versus the state, I can address both those points, but I want to move it more toward the capitalist socialism paradigm that
Right.
we center our conversation around. My apologies, I can easily go down the anarchy pathway anytime, so I got to be aware of that. Anyway, something I'm gonna shift gears slightly here. I was doing a little bit of research. This question's for Bryahn. I was doing a little bit of research ahead of time. Again, just looking at basic definitions, just kind of getting a refresher course. And I noticed something that I hadn't seen before because I'll just read this to you. What I was reading is this one article says the concept is from each according to his ability to each according to his contribution. Now, I've always heard it when I hear like capitalists or right-wing shows or what have you, when they talk about communism, socialism, they say from each according to his ability to each according to his need. I've heard it that way exclusively. I've never heard to his contribution, which I like that. I like that word way better than according to his need. And I'm just curious from your perspective, is this something that maybe that was just a one-off article, or which one is the prevailing idea here that I'm trying to work with you?
Yeah. Sorry, I guess I don't keep too much track of the slogan type stuff.
Well, which one have you heard? Have you heard that before?
Yeah, I think I've heard the need part. I don't know if I've heard the contribution one,
Yeah, I don't know where that
but
came from. I may need to look into that a little
yeah,
more.
but
I like it
I
so
guess
much
those
better.
are a bit jingoistic to me.
Yeah, I like it a lot better though because
Yeah.
it more describes what you're talking about in terms of, you know, yes, you may have some people that are paid 8 times more than your lowest paid guy. Like
Mhm.
that makes sense because it's based on your level of contribution. And like it, and everybody
Mhm.
would agree, yeah, this guy's clearly more skilled, he gets paid more money. And they're like most people are reasonable enough to go, yeah, that's and that would be the same in either system. So I'm
Yeah,
just
I mean,
curious why I've never heard that before, if that's something you've ever heard in your life when discussing
yeah,
these
I've never, I guess I never really discussed that, and I guess like as a when you come with those kind of like general slogans,
things. Mhm.
um, there's going to be truth on kind of like any side of a slogan. Um, it really just kind of boils down how does this like manifest itself as a policy or in reality, like each according to his receiving according to their need. I mean, everyone can make an argument for that. Like if a person's going to die unless they receive something, I do feel like there's maybe some. I think at least that we can agree it's moral to try to help a person if
Yeah.
they're
Oh,
in
yeah.
desperate need of something.
For sure,
And
for
so,
sure.
like that concept of giving the person according to their need, like a person who has a pacemaker might have more needs than a person who doesn't. Just random example. But I would like to try to keep people alive in general. So I would like to meet people's needs bare minimum. Um, but then, of course, you want to also give people according to their contributions, and that makes sense too. And so it just kind of depends on like where are we putting these stopping points on these like slogans. Um,
That's
does
a
that
good
make
point.
sense? What I'm saying?
Is that something you'd ever heard before, John? That
I've never heard it like that. No, that's something I've never heard.
yeah, I almost
Who determines what your contributions are and what your needs are?
Right. That's what I'm saying. These slogans, they get to a point of like, what do they really mean, and how far do we take them?
yeah, they're useful up to a point, but
Yeah.
at some point, yeah, like yeah,
But I could agree that the part about contributions probably sounds better to a lot of people, especially if you're more geared towards capitalism. And I mean, I guess anybody. I mean, yeah, everyone likes to
I,
be rewarded for their
I,
contribution. Everyone talks about a meritocracy, whether you're on the left or right. Everyone wants to be rewarded for their work done. Yeah.
I just
So
imagine it would be a lot easier sell if you're a capitalism hearing these ideas of of socialism. Like that makes a lot more sense. Like if I heard that, I'd be like, oh, that kind of sounds very similar to capitalism in general. I think the main key difference from what I'm understanding with our conversation in general is that it just has to do with compensation and pay structures and how much of a difference should it be. And that's if that's all we're talking about, that's great.
uh,
What
there are some more issues. Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, sure. Well, what I was wanting to get into is the biggest thing that I'm seeing is again the government ends up being these levers of power. Um, so when you hear these discussions expressed between different commentators from various sides, um, what I'm hearing as a voter is, well, if this particular ideology gets controls of the levers of power, that's the system I'm going to be forced to live under. Versus if I get if my idea wins over, then everybody's forced to live under that, and I can live with that. So I'll vote for that guy, right? It's just a basic, simple incentive structure, right? And if you take that away, if you get rid of that altogether, then that gives us back that voluntary nature of being able to choose one versus the other, rather than having that I don't know, almost anxiety that this ideology you disagree with might be in control of everything and I might be forced to live under that. And I think that might be what's driving people to dig so deep into those particular ideas without even looking at the other side. Does that ring true to either one of you guys?
It does. Who wants to be forced into something?
You know, Brian, when I say that, I know you're already anarchist, so you probably agree with me, but what comes to mind to you? Or like what do you feel like when I present it
Yeah.
in that frame?
Yeah. So I've had some discussions about forcing people into like a more socialist leaning society, and I don't believe in doing that. I mean, I think that for the most part, we just need to make sure that people have the opportunity to go into co-ops if they want to, make it kind of a more even playing field instead of just conventional firms or capitalist firms just being completely dominant and the other ones not really even being a feasible option. But the thing is, I ultimately I want the people to decide, and I think that if people are informed, that pretty much everyone would want to be in a co-op, rather than a hierarchical structure, unless you for some reason believe that you're going to be the lotto winner and you're going to be at the top and getting all the money funneled to you. And those people probably wouldn't want it. I mean, but I think your average person would be a lot happier if they had more control over their workplace, the things they produce, how they produced it, where they produced it at. And then we can get rid of a lot of the negative pieces that come from capitalism that just aren't obvious necessarily. Like even things like pollution and like in your backyard. But I'll just do a quick piece. It's like, for example, like in with a co-op, if everyone's if everyone's voting, probably no one's going to vote to pollute their water stream, because for the most part, people are going to be living around where they work, and that means they're going to be poisoning their own kids. But if you're in a capitalist, one, it's not guaranteed that your owner or board of directors live anywhere in that region, not even in the same watershed. So the concept of dumping pollution is going to be a lot harder for the worker co-op to vote on doing than it is going to be for one particular guy at the top to say, all right, we're going to just dump it in the river. So it's things like that. And even outsourcing, people don't tend to vote to outsource their own jobs, but a capitalist, he doesn't mind outsourcing your job. He's not going to outsource his ownership. So it's just a lot of the negative externalities.
I was sitting there thinking, I think most guys are trying to outsource their job. most guys who work in these businesses, they're typically trying to figure out how they can get out of the business, still make the money, of course, but how can they delegate their tasks, and as they move up and advance and they get better and they find other people that can do the tasks, they can move on to the next thing and they can work on I don't know, the next step, whatever that step is.
But I'm just talking about mainly for your common worker, the concept of like outsourcing your job, let's say to China.
Yeah,
that's just not going to be a thing they're going to do.
Well, I think a lot of that too has to do with monetary policy and the fact that the tax structure and all the government regulations just make it a necessity for companies, if they even want to have a hope to compete with these established companies. They have no choice but to do that.
But either way, a worker's not going to vote to outsource his own job.
Yeah. Well,
how would you deal with it if one of these crony capitalists corporations decide that they're going to go after the co-op and try to bury the co-op and put it out of business?
Are you talking about with or without government?
Just in general, with or without. How do you solve that?
Oh, yeah. Oh no, if you're asking like if we did the same gas station thought experiment.
Yeah, your gas station experiment, the crony capitalist gas station and the co-op gas station.
Yeah, if the crony capitalists had like 100 gas stations or have all the gas stations in the state, and the co-op try to introduce one gas station in the center of the state, that gas station is going to fail. I mean, if the capitalist wants that to fail, there's virtually nothing you can do about it. They can depress their, like I said, the prices around that one gas stations so far that it's just not even, they can't bring it that low. So there is no fix for that particular reason, that particular problem. That's just an issue with having capitalism.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I know typically when people are hearing, oh, hey, I'm trying to come up with a business idea, and one of the core common pieces of advice is, well, we find a need and fill it. Find a need and fill it, and it's it just makes me think, if I'm this gas station that is trying to open up, I'm not going to necessarily go and open it up where I know that's going to be a potential outcome, that's because there's clearly not a need. There's already gas stations there, but I would go somewhere where there is a need, where that company doesn't already exist, where I might actually have a chance at building up, because that this particular town or whatever, they do need a gas station, and we just happen to run it a different way. And this is where I would vote to go. Like if I'm part of this group trying to figure out where the hell to establish my business, I'm not going to put it in the center of a very, very well established other style business. I'm just not going to do that.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of that in the wash would end up kind of working itself out, and then you could build yourself that smaller company. You could continue to build it until you can compete, and then maybe you can start moving in on these territories where you're competing with capitalists because they can't compete with your model anymore. And then you get what I'm saying?
No, I get what you're saying, but I feel like there were tons of like mom and pops that already had that exact same thought, and Walmart came in and kind of ripped them to
Yeah,
pieces.
I'd say Walmart is a whole nother animal that doesn't quite fit into the capitalist versus socialist conversation. That's I would argue straight corporate what's it called, corporatism. There's so many things that they're able to take advantage of as far as government regulation. They are the capitalists we talk about that have the control over the levers of power. Like clearly we can tell.
Yeah,
And I just don't know that business model would necessarily exist in its current form in the absence of the state. I just don't think that would be a thing.
I
Yeah,
guess I don't
there's
understand
no way they could
what
have ever
stops it.
gotten that big. There's no way they could have gotten that big without using the levers of the state.
Yeah, for sure.
I guess I don't understand exactly what you're saying that stops it, because um, there's just like I said, there's a intrinsic nature of capitalism. Just that everyone knows, survival of the fittest, the best company. So if you got a company that is the best at the time, and it gets really big, and then it can crush mom and pops by planning and systematically spreading. I just don't. I mean, I understand you can use the government to expand faster. You can do it to give you more protections and so forth. But ultimately, you still can keep expanding. We had large monopolies and like oil companies, prior to governments, prior to the government being heavily involved in regulations and so forth. I mean, we already had like these big, oil barons and so forth.
Yeah, I've heard that argument made, and I've also heard a pretty good debunking of the whole robber barons scenario. I may send it to you later on. I can't remember the
Okay,
details of
yeah,
it.
that'd be great. I love to read it.
Yeah, the details aren't fresh in my mind, of course, but I've heard a pretty good debunk, or not debunk, but counter to that. I just I don't know. I feel like we're all agreeing that if there was less government involvement, that either one of these systems we'd be okay with it. I don't think either one of us, any of the three of us, have an issue with the either one of these systems necessarily. In as far as the structure of it, there's nothing immoral about it. There's nothing wrong about it. I, I,
Uh,
what I do have,
what if I were to propose to you that
sure.
I think that the world we're living in right now
Hmm.
is the result of uh, of basically would be the end result of an anarcho-capitalist society. I think what we're living in right now is basically that, because from the way I see it is, some group is going to have monopoly on violence, and even if that's just like if you're talking about settling land disputes or something like that, you have your land dispute agency. I have my land dispute agency,
Right.
and if they ultimately say, "All right, we got the gun, so we decide that this is the line," then effectively to me that's the government. So what you're really talking about is someone who's just simply paying whatever that agency is, company is, to get more favors. And that's going to make sense in anarcho-capitalism. And so essentially, if you keep paying these groups that have the monopoly on violence to like, just give me a little bit of tweak here, give me a little bit of tweak there.
Again, just to stop you there, if you have two different what did you call them, the property management companies or dispute companies,
Yeah.
automatically right there you don't have a monopoly on violence. You have clearly two companies that both could use violence, I guess, but I don't think that's the model. I don't think that would be the model, but
Yeah. I mean,
neither one of them has the monopoly on violence.
maybe I don't have the correct view on when the monopoly is, but I think you can still have a monopoly, and like it can be like a duopoly, or two or more companies having a large share of it. Maybe I'm using the wrong
Oligopoly.
term.
Oligopoly,
It's
yeah.
an oligopoly.
Right.
Yeah. So essentially, you still have like a region that's dominated by one place, and then regions dominated by another place, and this essentially to me forms what I would call the government. So
Yeah,
whether it's a monopoly or not,
theoretically, I think you could, but I
yeah,
honestly think it goes back to people's ability or inability to support those companies or organizations. And right now, we don't have the freedom to do so. We just kind of get thrust upon us whatever the hell is going to happen. Like the biggest thing the other day, I just saw where they're spreading mosquitoes, just dropping mosquitoes on people.
mm.
It's like
Oh yeah,
like
yeah, I've seen that.
it's like my first question was, all right, which one of you assholes voted for this? Rhetorical
Yeah,
question.
was that the GMO mosquito thing that try
Yeah,
to
yeah.
reduce the yeah.
Yeah, rhetorical question, of course, because literally none of us are going to vote for that. Like that's not anything any of us would have supported, but it's just something that's just thrust upon us. Like, okay, this is what we're doing now. And it's
Yeah,
just, I know this is a small example, but in general, that's kind of how I feel about how things are going. Like I feel completely powerless in the current paradigm. Whereas if we talk about what we're discussing today is like, I would feel a lot more, uh, I would be a lot more involved for first of all, because I would actually feel like I had some kind of say so or some kind of power in making decisions and voting with my dollars, so to speak.
Right. Well, and you also how about voting other people in to represent us in any sort of government? Right now, it's a joke.
Yeah, for
They're
sure.
they're out getting a job for themselves and enriching themselves. I don't feel, there are very few that are actually representing the people they are sent to represent.
I think it's safe to say we're all on the same page, feeling like we're all just lately just voting for the lesser of two evils. Yeah,
Right.
like
yeah.
there's never any good going to come out of that. It's going to continue to descend and devolve into whatever the hell we're heading toward, and it's not great. But I feel like as long as we're blaming it on those capitalists or those greedy socialists that just want to take everything.
I don't think anyone's blamed the socialists for any of the problem. The problems that we have in the United States clearly aren't the socialists' problems.
Well, if you listen to right wing radio, it's 100% all the left wing's fault. Everything's gone wrong, and vice versa.
Well,
If you listen to
right.
left wing radio, it's the rights, a bunch of Nazis, a bunch of bigots. They're all the reason why we have all the problems.
Well,
And that's not a solution for literally anything. Like both sides are doing this
Right.
bicker
Well,
and forth and
while we're busy fighting, they're doing their thing and enriching themselves.
yeah.
yeah, but this is the thing I find is really interesting about it, because it's like they constantly are blaming the socialists and like this, at least the right wing, right extreme media is. But the fact of the matter is, when you really look at, like I said, the general view of what socialism is and how socialism represents itself in America, I just haven't seen the co-ops buying politicians. I just haven't seen it yet.
Well,
If there's a politician that's bought out by the co-ops, send me that politician's name. I might have a donation for him. But I don't think that politician exists.
well that's
All the
when
politicians are bought out
Oh,
by
if a
conventional
politician
firms.
can make money off of it, they could get bought by a co-op. If the co-op gets together and determines it's in their interest,
they could.
Yeah, if you
doing
can
it.
give me an example of like a co-op
Yeah.
that's bought a politician, I mean, like I'm all
Well,
for it.
you
Let
don't
me-
I
necessarily.
think the problem right now is there's not enough co-ops for that to really happen yet.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's my point exactly. So there is not an issue of the socialists doing anything to America. There's just not enough of them. There's not enough power in the
two
socialist
things.
arena.
You don't necessarily need an example to express the possibility of it happening. And
Right.
the second point is most right wingers will point toward communist countries or failures in the past to express what could happen if we continue to go down that road. That road's bad, and this is why. And
I'm sorry, I need to charge my battery. I'll be right back.
Okay, sure.
Right. So if that's not a bad idea, and if it's not a bad idea, and you can explain how it's going to be different, how it's not going to be the same outcome that all of these other countries have experienced, you've got something to talk about. When you're rebranding it with a new, a new label on it, and it's the same stuff, like why do we expect a different result? I mean, that's the thing to overcome to get people to agree that maybe it's an idea, maybe it's not. But when it's the same rehab stuff, it's.
I 100% agree. If we were trying to do the same thing in America that have failed in other countries, you're 100% right. But when you look at the other countries, I haven't seen them. None of these socialist countries that I think you may be referring to are like majority co-op. So it seems it seems like you're talking about maybe some other form of
what are
socialism
they?
or some type of command capitalism. Like I would say, like China, for example, I often hear that one used. I'd say China seems to function as command capitalism. It seems like the state tells people what has like a general goal of where they want to go. They'll let some private individuals become millionaires and billionaires, from owning a company. So the money's been funneled to those private individuals, but that private individual is still at the command of the state. So that to me, just state capitalism. That's not the flattening that I'm talking about via co-ops.
Yeah, I don't think any run-of-the-mill capitalist is going to hear that and go, "Yeah, that's capitalism." Or like state cap. No, I think what you're saying is,
totally bizarre.
It's called command capitalism. You can
well,
look
I
it up.
think,
It's a known thing.
yeah, I think what you're seeing is more of another example of crony capitalism, where you got this hand in hand, these capitalist entities with the governments working hand in hand to help each other out and give each other benefits and whatnot. And
Yeah.
I don't think any run-of-the-mill capitalist is going to look at that model or this model or any model for that matter and go, "Yeah, I totally like that."
But I don't think any socialist in America is looking at that model and saying, "I like that, and we should implement that."
Right, 100%.
Yeah.
That leads
Yeah.
me to my final question for you guys is what I want to ask each of you, and I think we'll start with John on this one. Is what are some of the biggest misconceptions, or give me like one or two of the biggest misconceptions that when you have these discussions with the opposite idea? What are some of the biggest misconceptions they have about your?
It seems to be everybody thinks that everybody involved in capitalism is some greedy, they're greedy and out to make money at all expenses, and most people that are capitalists are really just out to have a better life for themselves.
You want to throw one more before I switch it over to John? Another misconception about capitalism, I guess.
No, that's kind of the big one.
Okay. Well, we'll pass it on to Brian. Brian, what do you think? What are some of the biggest misconceptions that you hear about socialism that people have completely wrong?
Yeah, I think the biggest issue is that people use socialism and Marxism in a very singular form,
Mhm.
and they don't understand that there are just many different variations. Some that just completely don't agree with each other, um, and I find that people tend to want to pick one, and they want to hold that one view and like spread it over everyone else, even the people who like vehemently disagree. And no matter how much you disagree, they want to say, "Well, it's the state, and you're for the state doing this." And I'm like, "No, I'm an anarchist," and it's just like the constant rehashing of that. I'm not saying that either one of you guys are like overly doing that,
Right.
but I find that be just the hugest barrier.
So kind of like when the media finds one Nazi that wants to vote for DeSantis, and suddenly that's extrapolated to all Republicans and all DeSantis supporters are this way, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I haven't heard that before. I haven't heard any, even like the not terribly credible popular news sources like CNN and so forth. I haven't heard them say that all DeSantis supporters are Nazis.
Well, it's kind of the general joke. It's become so common.
Yeah, and it may be. I haven't heard it personally.
Well,
I guess that's a big
guess,
media problem too.
Yeah, I guess the idea. Sorry, I guess the idea is, or sorry, I guess the idea is basically what you're talking about is I'm just showcasing that in another arena where they take the worst example of one person and then extrapolate that to all people on that side, or most of them believe this, or something like that. I see it all the time, but going both ways. It's hilarious to see. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there or cut you off there, John.
Oh yeah, I mean that's what I was saying. I mean that's a media problem. Like that's the media is supposed to be there to protect the truth, and it doesn't do that anymore.
God, you talk about a whole nother conversation we could have.
Oh, I've got about 3 other conversations that come across my, that I've jotted down that were whole discussions in themselves.
Yeah. Okay, I want to throw you guys one more question. Again, we'll start with Bryahn on this one. What is some of the best qualities of capitalism? What's one good thing about capitalism that you appreciate? Like, what would be something that you could get on board with, I guess?
Oh yeah, I can name a bunch of good things about capitalism. And maybe that's something that I mentioned earlier, is that I don't see capitalism as an evil system per se, and I don't see capitalists as evil people. Um, I see capitalism maybe more or less something like shoes that we have grown out of. They were good for a time, but now it's time to like to progress forward. So just maybe like a quick history lesson, and also to credit to capitalism is that before capitalism, most of Europe and actually in the colonies in the United States, they were under a system called feudalism. Feudalism was a pretty bad system. If all the workers, they were essentially forced to send all their money to their feudal lords, from the peasant workers to the feudal lord. What capitalism did, it freed a lot of these peasants and serfs, allowed them to leave the lands they were on, start their own businesses, maybe to some degree become like their own little mini feudal lord within their work hours to funnel things up. But it still was far more decentralized than feudalism. And the more we can decentralize things, the better. And so capitalism was a great first step in that decentralization process. It really works without capitalism first. I could be wrong, and some other socialists may disagree on that. But
Sure.
yeah, but I see this from from feudalism to capitalism onto socialism. That's the steps that we're supposed to take far as humanity, as far as like trying to decentralize and get to a more moral system. So capitalism did a lot, vast majority of the kings, queens, and dukes, and so forth, who were just shitting on all the peasants.
What about you, John? What are some good positives about socialism that you could see?
I don't know if you're talking a blended system, I definitely can see how a co-op might work in a blended system. I don't see how you get to a point to where you can eliminate to get it to a I don't know how it stays blended without the government trying to keep control in it, and that just seems to always throw a wrench in the works.
Well, just for future reference, I would recommend, and you can take this with a grain of salt. I'm no expert on this or anything, but just in general, it's usually good to have at least something positive to say about the other side, or some just in general.
I do the co-op idea of having a partnership of a bunch of people seems like a capitalist idea to me, but Bryahn leans on it as something socialist. I kind of see it as neither, but I do see that as a positive of one of his ideas. I'm just not sure that the entire economy could get to a point where that works.
Yeah,
I do like the idea on a smaller scale.
Now,
But why do you think it wouldn't work on it as a like, let's just say vast majority co-ops, and then maybe there were some capitalist firms scattered in there. If we were transitioning like to eventually like a full co-op system, let's say we were at that point, what do you think would be? What do you think would cause society to collapse via the co-ops?
Cause society collapse because of the co-ops. I think you're going to wind up with people no longer making the contributions they're going to make. Yeah, I mean you'll get some. I don't.
So you think everyone's going to quit working and quit earning money to support their families?
Isn't that what we've got going on right now? Isn't that what
no? I've never seen the fact that co-ops make people quit working.
I'll be interested. I'm just talking in general. People having an opportunity to freeload off of other people, and
I think you might be referring to something. I don't think that what you're talking about is necessarily what Bryahn.
Yeah, I think we're going down a whole nother tangent.
Yeah,
that could be a whole nother conversation.
For sure. Okay, well, listen, guys, I appreciate you guys. I really do. You guys agreeing to come and discuss this topic. I think it's really, really cool to get together and have these conversations. How was this conversation for you guys?
I
No,
enjoyed
I enjoyed it too. I think there's a lot more common when you're talking face to face than when you're online. I mean, it seems to be like, it seems like we agree on a lot of things.
Yeah, that seems to be my
You look at our
experience.
online conversation, it looks like we don't agree on anything ever.
Yeah, that
But
seems to be my experience in general as well.
yeah, and I guess it doesn't help that online we only bring up like the pain points, the pressure points of society, and
Yeah.
then we just keep banging each other over these, and we don't talk about like how's your family doing, or like that's a nice house you like you're sitting in. We don't have those just normal conversations that kind of make a community.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I look forward to doing another one of these if you guys are down for it. Maybe a different topic that we started to branch off into, perhaps.
Yeah,
or
I've got a
some
couple
additional
topic ideas. I'll shoot you.
Okay. Yeah, just throw them at me later after the show, and we'll go from there. You guys have been watching the Unframe of Mind show, where we have uncomfortable conversations without a condom, and this was no different. I feel like this went rather well. I didn't have any expectations for this conversation going into it, and I'm really glad that we were able to cover the wide range of topics that we were able to cover. What do you guys think? Is there something that you heard on today's episode that made you think maybe I had it all wrong about the other side? Is there something that you heard that made you decide, okay, I might look into that a little deeper? Maybe I don't listen to my chosen news source for all of my information about what the other guy's doing. I think that would be very, very helpful in terms of moving us forward as a society if more people could be open to alternative ideas and not just automatically think that they're the devil because, well, we were told they were the devil. It doesn't make any sense. So with that being said, thank you for coming on the show, guys, and subscribe. You know where the button's at. It's right over there. Well, it's over there. It's over there. All right. I'm going to end the recording now.